So the recipe that I'm going to be making for you today is called syrup cookies. It's not a recipe that I think many people know about. It's something that my grandma always used to make, and just always remember them always being in her cupboard. Uh, if I went over to her house, then either she'd offer them to me or she'd see me going for the cupboard and she'd be like, "I'll get them for you." Um, but sometimes she wouldn't even be home, and I would bike over to her place, open up the cupboard, and then have a few. And then she would see me the next time and say, "Somebody took some cookies from my cupboard." And I would always say sorry, but I knew she was cool with it. But anyways, one of the main ingredients for these cookies is Rogers Golden Syrup. It's not a super common ingredient that I've seen in recipes, but it's what makes these cookies special, and there's a historic aspect to it as well. So anyways, syrup cookies. So the directions for this recipe are a little bit vague. They're from a little cue card that my grandma transcribed the recipe out onto, and some of this is a little bit of guesswork, and I'm going to actually tweak the recipe just a little bit because I'm interested in trying something out. But anyways, the recipe calls for enough flour to make a soft dough, and it doesn't tell me the directions as far as what order to put the ingredients in, but I've always been taught to do dry ingredients first. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the sugar, and this is 1 cup of sugar. I'm just going to pour that into my mixer there. And then this is where I tweaked it a little bit. The recipe called for 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And something that I learned was that in order for baking soda to activate, there needs to be an acid. And I don't want to change the recipe that much. I don't think there's anything acidic in the ingredients, so I'm not sure if the baking soda would even do anything. But I do know it has a particular taste, and I don't want to take that away from the recipe. So what I'm doing instead, I'm doing 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda, because the recipe called for 2 teaspoons of baking soda. So I'm going to see what this does. Hopefully I don't end up with some weird shaped cookies, but so here's the baking powder and the baking soda. So there's 2 dry ingredients, and I think I'm going to start with, I guess I'm going to start with 2 cups. 2 cups of flour. I don't want to overdo it with the flour because I can always add more, but I can't obviously take it out. So I'll start with 2. Probably need more than that, but we'll give it a shot. So I'm just going to mix this up a little bit. So yeah, I'll start adding the wet ingredients. We've got half a cup of milk right here. That can go in. And the key ingredient, we'll wait on that. We're going to do 2 eggs. 1, and be careful, obviously, not to get any eggshells in there. That's always kind of gross when you get an eggshell in one of your cookies. I think I did okay. Now I'm going to add 6 tablespoons of Rogers Golden Syrup. And I know earlier I talked about there being an historical, ahistorical, you choose. A historical aspect to the Rogers Golden Syrup. This was a staple in my grandma's house, and it kind of was a little bit in my house growing up too, but especially my grandma's house. This was used for everything. Like my grandma made caramel corn with it. there was at breakfast time, it would be buns, freshly baked buns with peanut butter and Rogers Golden Syrup. It was just always used in all sorts of recipes for sweetener and everything. And I think part of the reason was that because actually Rogers and a lot of name brands, even stove brands and mixer brands, would come out with cookbooks. And a lot of the cookbooks back then were put out by these brands. And especially, ingredient brands like Blue Ribbon baking powder or things like that. But there was a Rogers Golden Syrup recipe book, and I'm assuming this is where this recipe came from. It's really a popular recipe in the Mennonite community, and I grew up in that kind of area. My heritage is Mennonite heritage, and I do know that a lot of Mennonite people used Rogers Golden Syrup quite extensively in their cooking. So anyways, like I said, kind of a unique ingredient, and they're one of my favorite cookies, so it's probably because of the Rogers Golden Syrup. So anyways, we have 6 tablespoons of Rogers Golden Syrup. It's a sweet recipe, but it's super good. This stuff is super sticky. I don't know if you could substitute this syrup with anything else. I know that we also had something that we ate growing up. We eat it with watermelon. It's called the Rollkuchen. That's a Low German word. That's the heritage language of the Mennonite people. So basically what Rollkuchen is deep fried, rolled out dough. And you'd eat it with your watermelon. But as dessert, after the watermelon and Rollkuchen, we would dip our Rollkuchen into the Rogers Golden Syrup. And I know that I was at somebody's house once and they had golden corn syrup, but it didn't work. It wasn't right. And if you've never had Rogers Golden Syrup, it's got a really, really unique flavor. I really like it. Golden corn syrup doesn't quite have the same flavor. So I would just suggest maybe just picking some up. Try having some peanut butter and syrup. It's delicious. Anyway, the last ingredient that I have here, second last ingredient I have, is 1 cup of butter. And I'm just going to break that up into there with my bare hands. Wash them, don't worry about it. Break them up into there. And then I have a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So I'm just going to turn the mixer on, and then I'm going to get it to a soft dough, which is what the recipe calls for. So that's a little bit vague, but I'm just going to add flour until I think the dough is the right consistency. So this is another thing about my grandma's recipes. There was often measurements omitted because she knew them in her head, and quite often she would never use like a recipe. She would just kind of go for it. And there's a word that she had, was a Low German word again, and it was "vernünftig," which means whatever. Like I would be asking my grandma, "Oh, how many cups of flour should I put in?" She'd be saying, "vernünftig." Means just whatever. Whatever you need to make the recipe, that's what you use. And so that's basically what I'm going off of here. I'm going to add the flour until I have what I think is the right consistency. think that's about right. So I'll chill it, and then I'm going to cut shapes, and then I'm also going to make some icing. And the icing that I'm going to be making, I have no idea how to make it. My grandma passed away in 2011, so I can't ask her, but I did ask my Auntie Phyllis, and she seems to think that it was mixing cream, icing sugar, and some vanilla. So I'm going to see if I can get the icing right just by fooling around with those ingredients. But anyways, I'm going to chill this, and then yeah, I guess we'll see you later. So now it's time for me to make the icing. Something that should always be considered when you're putting icing on things is that things are really cooled down. Otherwise, when you put the icing on, it could melt and not set up properly. So I've waited till the next day in order to put the icing on these cookies. And looks like they're ready to go. And again, like I said, the icing I have no idea how to make, so I'm kind of just playing this one completely by ear, and we'll see how it goes. But I have been told that cream is an ingredient, icing sugar, vanilla, so I'm just going to start mixing stuff together like that. I'll start with half cup of icing sugar. I think I'll need more than that. Maybe go full cup. This might be too much, but whatever. I'll just make more cookies. So I'll just add some cream in here. I'll whip it up. And I was thinking of adding a half teaspoon of vanilla. This looks pretty good. So I've iced the cookies, and they look pretty good. But last thing to do is just to taste them and see how it went. Like I said, it's been quite a long time since I've had one of these, so we'll see. Gonna eat this little snowman. Yeah, they're just like I remember them. You can taste the baking soda a little bit, but it's not super strong. So I think I would, next time I make these, I think I will do half baking soda, half baking powder, because even though baking soda's got that kind of bitter flavor to it, it kind of adds to the cookie. But man, they're soft and they're sweet, and it brings me back to my childhood, and I love them. Cheers.